Recently, I visited the Caribbean. I went to a number of islands, 4 or 5 different islands, and yes, I went full tourist. Now, there are those of us who like to go back to either where we were born or where our parents were born or our grandparents were born, and not like say, we're locals, we belong there kind of thing. Of course, the locals themselves know exactly what the situation is. And the way they look at us, we can't change that, so why bother trying to pretend? But there are those who like to think because they live in England or they live in America or they live in France or Holland that somehow they're better. They come from a civilized country and they expect people to look up to them, respect them, kind of thing. And of course, same thing, the locals know who they are and treat you just like any other foreigner. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm a local, treat me like a local, but then I come from foreign. I'm a better person than you. I come from a more civilized country, kind of thing. Bringing the same values to the Caribbean that it suffered for centuries from the other Europeans, the white Europeans. But when I was there, the point of this is that everywhere I went, people went, Hail Rasta, yes Rasta, welcome Rasta. Now, I try hard to ensure that people don't mistake me for a member of Rastafarian faith. This, I never grow, much more than this. So that those who know will know that I am not Rasta, therefore will not mistake what I do and what I say with the teachings of Rastafari or not associate them with them. But there we are in the Caribbean, which is the home of Rastafari, an Africanist faith in what is essentially an Africanist part of the country. I mean, forget about what people say about, I don't know, how can you call it African? That was hundreds of years ago when Africans were brought there. Yeah, maybe it started hundreds of years ago, but it carried on for hundreds more years. And we know for a fact that there are Africans being taken as slaves into the Americas, well into the 20th century. In America, one of the earlier countries to abolish slavery, we had people who had been taken as slaves from Africa still alive in the 1940s. And if you believe that passing a law and making something illegal will automatically bring it to an end, well, if that were the case, there'd be no murder, no rape, no robbery. How long have we had laws against those? But they continue. And the fact is that even after slavery, Europeans were still importing Africans from Africa, because in Africa there were those who maybe had been slaves or through centuries of colonization had become very Europeanized, Christianized in the European Christian sense, not the African Christian sense. They thought that by bringing those to the Americas post-slavery, that they would help civilize the Africans there, that they would help guard against revolution, against hatred against white people and their culture. So yes, Africans were still being brought to the Caribbean, to the Americas, well into the 20th century. And of course, when Africans were brought there in the first place, you have to remember that Europeans had arrived there. And their arrival brought with it death to the local Native Americans. Death through disease, through colonization, through wars to take their lands, and even attempts to use the Native Americans, as their slave labor, which didn't quite work, partly because protection from the church, who wanted to turn these into more Christians. The Europeans themselves didn't particularly want to settle there. They saw the Caribbean as a backwater. You know, they much rather go to North America or South America where all the parties are and the shops are and that sort of thing. Being sent to the Caribbean was almost like a punishment. The only ones there were really those needed to manage the plantation. So over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, we had millions upon millions upon millions of people taken from Africa, settle there, when on the one hand, the Native American population had been virtually wiped out on most islands, and there are very few Europeans there. So we dominate. Today, Caribbean islands are still genetically roughly maybe about 70 to 90% African, and their populations are roughly the same. So yes, an Africanist religion in what is essentially an Africanist part of the world, and yet the people there don't seem to know anything about it or understand it in that sense. The other point is, people have this idea that the only reason you could have for wearing dreadlocks is religious belief. It's almost like, why would you have this stuff on your head if it wasn't for a religious belief? Why would you wear this ugly hair? Because that's what people feel. You know, when I was there, we went on a guided tour. Yeah, like I said, went full tourist. And the tour guide announced the fact that, yeah, there are a lot of Rastas on that island. And you can identify them by their dreadlocks. She went on to say that there are others who have dreadlocks, but they're not Rasta. They do it for fashion dreads. Now, sitting at the back of the bus, I kept silent. I didn't want to start anything on the bus. But when we had a break and we all got off, I had a quick chat with the tour guide and explained that on the one hand, I make it obvious that I'm not Rasta, or at least try to make it obvious. Obvious to those who know, not maybe obvious to the ignorant. On the other hand, I don't wear my locks for fashion. Yes, you might style them. That's your prerogative. I wear my locks because it's the natural way that my hair grows. It is the natural way for African hair to grow, and I'm proud of it. I wear my locks because I am African. Now, you could say the same for Rastafari, because there is no tenet in Rastafari that says that you must have locks. There are two. One says that you mustn't cut your hair. Two says that you must live ital, and your hair too must be ital, i.e. natural. And so Rastafari, to a certain extent, is a living example of how natural this hair is, that it's not contrived for style or fashion. Because if all you do is not cut your hair and keep it natural, that means not dragging combs through it or putting softeners in it, definitely not putting relaxers in it and so on, and hot combs and covering it with a wig. Keep it natural. What do you get? You get dreadlocks, and that's why Rasta have dreadlocks. They don't necessarily set out to have dreadlocks, they just keep their hair natural and don't cut it. Now, it's saying something that in this day and age, we still have to have an excuse or a reason to be ourselves, that we can't be ourselves otherwise. We have to go out of our way to try to fit in to what Europeans would like us to be. Short hair, long straight hair, light skin, etc., etc. It says that we still don't know who we are, let alone love what we are. And of course, if we don't love or even respect what we are, how can we expect others to love or respect what we are? We are more than just a skin colour.